I'm going to show you how to add some extra workspace in a dedicated workshop or a small area that you can afford to give up some wall space by creating a wall-mounted workbench. This particular workbench is made primarily for light duty and some extra work area. With cool features such as the undermount storage, a good footprint for me to tinker with my electronics and even do some soldering. The top is secured in place with 2 barrel bolts, one on each side. And by lifting the top, you'll find a good amount of storage to put away your belongings, and depend on how much of a DIY creator you are, it is possible to put a good portion of your workshop right in here. To make adjustments, simply lift, press in, and lower the workbench. And with a few adjustable angles starting off at 70 degrees, then up to 80 degrees, and finally 90 degrees. Having the ability to adjust the angle makes for a great drafting table as well. And when you're done with the workbench, just simply lower it and close up shop for the day. Stick around and I'll show you just how it's made. Now all these cuts can be made with less tools using a circular saw, or you can get the wood cut at your local hardware store where you purchase the lumber. Now of course, having these tools in the workshop just make your life a lot easier. But I'm gonna start off this project by ripping down one sheet of plywood in half, and once I get that to a manageable size, I can then fine tune the cuts down on a table saw. Now once the plywood was ripped down to size, I'm gonna now clamp the plywood together and then make one cut through to cut the plywood to my desired length. Now to make this cut, I'm using my DIY saw guide, and if you want to find more things like this, just check out my limited tool series where you can find all sorts of information to get you started. So I'm now gonna cut down a few 2x4s for the side, the back, and also the dividers on the inside. And now with everything cut, here's a quick overview on what the end result's gonna look like after everything is all assembled. I'm gonna start off with the back and one of the side. Apply wood glue in between the joint, clamp, pre-drill, and then screw. Now I'm gonna add this 2x4 divider, which also create the storage in the back side. Then I'll make my way to the opposite side and repeat the same process. And making sure everything is square is definitely a plus, and it just makes everything go together more nicely. Now this small piece of 2x4 that I'm using as a spacer, this is also going to be for the middle divider and the big storage in the back. Now you can add as many dividers as you like in a workbench like this. For myself, I'm not sure how much I'll be storing in these actually, but you know, it's always the thought. Now I'm going to move on to making the smaller storage, and I'm taking 2 pieces of 2x4 and applying a piece of plywood on the front side of it. Now this can be as big or small as you like, but just think about the 2 spaces on the side, the open storage, and just make sure you have enough room to your liking. And now I can screw the 2 parts together. And at this point we have a frame that needs a little dressing up. I'm actually flipping the hinges in the opposite direction. This is why I'm countersinking the opposite side, because one side is countersink, and you can see here I just duplicated it on the other side. So I do find this jar horse very useful. If you're interested in one of these, just check out the link down in the video description. It's been a great addition to the workshop to hold awkward pieces such as this one. Now before attaching the hinges, I want to get rid of this gap that's between the plywood and also the 2x4 frame. Now the best way I see to do that is to kind of mortise the hinge right into the 2x4. So what I'm going to do is just notch out this section, and this way the hinge can literally sit into that opening. Just use a razor to score the outside, and then take a chisel to remove the unwanted pieces. So this actually looked pretty good, and this is exactly what I was looking for. And at this point I can now sand the frame, and while it's all accessible and everything is open, it's the best time to sand it down. Now if you've ever installed hinge before, then you know how tough it is to install the screws and also keep your hinge straight. Well, you know, for years I had no idea about this drill bit, and now I have one, so I think it just makes sense to share the knowledge with you guys that are not familiar with it. There's a such thing, a drill bit for the hinge hole. Now just repeat the same process for the remaining hinge. I used a total of 4. And with the hinge in place, I can now attach the top. So what you want to do here is sit the top in place and then make sure you square it all up. Now clamp the 2 sides, get underneath or flip it over, then install a few screws in the hole that's exposed. Now repeat the same process until all the hinges are attached. And at this point you can flip the top open and then install the remainder of the screws. Now you do want to make sure that the head of the screw do not interfere with the way the door closes. Now flip the workbench upside down and the bottom should be facing up. Now install the barrel bolt catch on a small piece of wood. Now if you want to get fancy, you could eliminate this altogether, drill a hole in the 2x4 and attach a mending plate on the top side of the 2x4, and this way it'll prevent the wood from ripping. To keep things simplified, we're going to go with this route. I'm going to do some pre-drilled holes on the side and then I'll attach it to the side wall using a few screws. Then I can take the barrel bolt and then line it up with the hole. Now if you want to make this super tight, you can probably just do it so it's off just a hair, and that way you can force the bolt in there and you don't have to worry about any gaps. But for me, it's not a big concern. Now apply wood glue on the outline of the 2x4s and then sit the bottom in place. Now after lining it up, clamp it down and add screws. To remove the sharp edges, I'm going to use a router and a round over bit. Now if you don't have a router, you can always use a orbital sander to round over the edge as well. Now these brackets are fold down shelf brackets and they're rated for 750 pounds per pair. Now I'm using the 12-inch bracket, but I wish I had the 16-inch bracket, so I would recommend you go with the 16-inch bracket because you actually just get more length. And as you can see here, where my hand is, the 16-inch would probably bring you out to about here, so I don't have to reach as far back as I'm reaching now with the 12-inch. Now as I'm installing the bracket, I took a piece of wood which represents the thickness of my workbench plus an additional 1/4 inch on it. Now this is an exterior wall which have cinder block behind the drywall, and I'm going to be using a hammer drill to drill all the way through and into the block. Now I did locate wood in the wall, which is better known as framing strip, which I'm going through that and also into the brick wall. So I'm using that as backing so I don't break the drywall as I mount to it. Now in most applications, I would say add a support like a piece of wood behind the bracket, and that would give you an even stronger installation. Now as I stated before, my main purpose of this workbench was to give me some extra work surface in the shop that I can actually fold away. Now at this point I can't give you any feedback on how they hold up because I'm actually using them for the first time. Now that the brackets are installed, I can install the top and secure those in place with a few screws from underneath. Now if you are planning to use this a ton and you're going to be storing a lot of weights in it, I'm going to suggest you probably add a couple nuts and bolts in these as well. That way you can secure the top firmly to the bracket. And at this point you can now apply your favorite coat of finish to your workbench, and I'm using white because that blends into my workspace just fine, and here's the end results. Now I kept the areas natural where I plan to store things, tools and other components that I may just want to throw inside. Depending on what you store in here and how big you actually make this could get heavy. Now the measurement from front to back is 23 inches, and going with the 16-inch brackets would have made me feel even better. However, I'm using the 12-inch brackets and I'm not worried about this because they're rated for 750 pounds. This thing stands more of a chance to fall off the wall than the brackets actually breaking. The storage that I have in here, it's a great place to store a ton of my electronic components. And even though this is in my workshop, you don't have to think workshop when you see this. You can actually put this in the home, whether it's in the craft room, whether it's in your office space. You can put this in many different places that you can actually use as a fold down desk or workbench. I also want to thank my supporters on Patreon for supporting the channel and actually making this build possible, plus a few more that we have coming up. I'm Glenn with DIY Creators and love to hear your thoughts on this build. If you want to see more shop related projects, then do let me know, and don't forget to smash that like button and also comment, share, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.